So the path to senior, you all know, I'm Davey. I work for Fretless. Davey at fretless.com. D-Struce on the Twitters and all that stuff. This was me like the week that we founded Fretless. So we're here to talk about senior developers. They're a serious threat, but with some careful planning and a few tips, you can learn how to protect yourself and your loved ones from senior developers, and maybe even learn how to destroy them. So I want to start by clearing up a few myths, a few misconceptions. Myth number one, senior developers don't rule the night. Nobody does. Myth number two, you can't become a senior developer by getting bitten by a senior developer. That is superstitious nonsense. That's in the movies. Real life, bites from senior developers are painful, but with some antibiotic ointment and stuff, it'll pass in a couple of days. Okay, this has run its course. So we are here to talk about how you become a senior developer, however. Are there any boot camp grads here? Yes. Well, I don't know. You have an hour and a half to screw it up. But so far, it looks like you're going to. So by the end of this summer, I will have taught about 400 in various formats. So started out doing 1 week boot camps that were 12 hours a day. And by a week, I mean 7 days a week, like Saturday to Friday, 12 hours a day. Not my idea, not humane for student or teacher. But yeah, I did that thing for a while. Did some Ruby boot camps that way and some JavaScript boot camps that way. Then started doing these, which is a lot more humane. So anyway, seen a lot of people go through it. Seen some people go on to decent, basically just kind of improve their careers or successfully change careers, like nurses who became developers or whatever. As well as just like seeing some young people mature a lot and start contributing to companies in a real and impressive way. Dana is herself a bootcamp grad. Jury's still out on whether she amounts to a hill of beans, but some companies hire a ton of new developers but don't really know what to do with them once they've hired them because they just don't have any kind of apprenticeship program or anything like that. And a lot of the boot camps just sort of, you get a lot of practical knowledge in a very short time. But like in something 3 weeks long, there's obviously not a lot of time for us to talk about like how to behave in the workplace or anything like that. We pretty much just have to do code all the time. Obviously, TechPoint's other materials that you're doing kind of helps a little bit with that. But 3 weeks ain't long. But you're all actually going to college, and hopefully you're not all about to drop out as soon as this thing ends, because that's like not TechPoint's mission. So anyway, this talk in general is aimed a lot at junior developers who just aren't even sure how to make a plan for how to grow from here, other than just like doing more tutorials, which is only going to get you so far because it's not all about technical mastery. And then sometimes I give this to a room full of people who are all experienced developers already, and it can kind of help them grow their own team, give them ideas for how to mentor their junior developers, stuff like that. Maybe even give them some tips for things to look for when hiring, because hiring someone who's a technical wizard but a complete jerk is not very productive long term, and some of these things can sort of help weed that out. So to become a senior developer, it helps to have a clear picture of what a senior developer is, and this is a surprisingly controversial topic. I mean, this is 2018. It shouldn't be a surprise that anything's controversial. The color of the sky is controversial now. So like the last time I gave this talk was at a conference about a month ago, and like 3 days before the talk, I saw on Twitter, like somebody just tweeted, okay, here's my senior developer checklist. And they had like a list of 7 traits. Instant Twitter fight. Just instant, like, how dare you? So it can be a little controversial defining what these things are. So I'm going to try anyway. So I'm going to hopefully give you some actionable advice on how to grow from here beyond the scope of pure pure technical mastery. And we're also going to kind of redefine technical capability a little bit from what you might expect it to mean. So here we go. The most obvious trait of a strong developer is probably technical capability. Different people define senior developer differently, but I think everyone agrees that you have to know the tech, right? So once you've identified this as an area in which you want to grow, however, how do you grow? What specifically do you need to work on to improve your technical capability besides just like memorizing more APIs? So we'll get into this more in just a few minutes, in about 10 minutes. But first, I'll give you someone else's kind of breakdown of this. A guy named Tony Dewan came up with his scale of awesomeness. So he used to teach a web development class at a college, and he came up with this scale for his students to give them an idea of kind of how he grades. So even though it was designed for a class, it's actually a pretty good general purpose measure of a developer's work. So this is the scale, and that's Tony. Does it work? Does it work well? Could it work better? And could it work elsewhere? First on the scale, does it work? Does it meet the functional requirements? Great. In Tony's class, you'll probably pass. Outside of a classroom, you probably won't get fired if your stuff works. But what do you think of someone who only does the bare minimum? We have higher standards for ourselves than that. Working is not enough. So does it work? Next on the scale, does it work well? Is the user experience acceptable? Behold, the Norman door, named after the inspiration of Don Norman's classic book, The Design of Everyday Things. Door totally opens. It totally works. But the user experience is horrible. You shouldn't have to put the words push on a gosh darn door. It should be obvious how the door works. If it's that kind of door, man, you just put a flat plate. If you put a handle on it like that, it should be a pull. So, yeah, user experience. Does it work? You're not finished when it works. You need to make it work well. If you pull this off, you'll probably get a good grade. Or in the workplace, people may actually like you. Yes, even you. The folks in sales and marketing, maybe even customers, they'll all sing your praises. You made a thing, and it works well. It makes their jobs easier. But other developers on your team may still hate you. This is not enough. And keep in mind, whenever I say other developers may hate you, the developer who hates you may be you a month from now. So we'll talk more about that. Does it work? Does it work well? Could it work better? I think he made this scale so that each item on the scale would be parallel in construction. What he really means by could it work better is, can it be maintained? Could you even refactor it if you wanted to? What's refactoring? Do you remember refactoring? I think we used this word once. The process of restructuring existing code without changing its behavior. So the question here is, so it works and it works well. Like if we needed to refactor for some reason, could we? Can we even read this crap well enough to improve it if we wanted to? Can anyone else read it? Can everyone else read it? If those things are true, then you'll probably get a job. Or if you have one, you'll probably get a raise. So code is read a whole lot more than it's written. You write something once, you're going to have to go back to that file and read it and try to understand it a million times. So there's a lot of value in trying to make the thing understandable. Use good variable names, use good method names, use good class names. Make methods nice and short. If you have a 50-line method, that's a problem, especially if you named it something terrible. Each method should have a single responsibility. We could go into all this stuff and spend all day on it, but we don't have time. So just briefly, it is worth the effort learning how to write readable, maintainable code. Not just because you're going to have to work on teams and other people have to be able to understand and maintain your crap, but also you have to be able to. You're probably, even at this stage, if you've taken any programming classes where you worked on the same project for more than a day or two, you've probably already wanted to kick yourself because you had no idea what on earth you were thinking when you wrote something. You can't figure out what on earth that thing actually does. So it is really worth taking a little extra time as you write to make it maintainable. In the case of something like React, make lots of very small components. We could have written that thing all in one huge component, but that would have been nasty and it would have had about 40 methods. So, not going to lie, this stuff's difficult. It can take longer to learn to write readable code than it takes to learn to make things that work well. So, I've been doing this an embarrassingly long time, and sometimes it's still a serious challenge to take my code from working and working well to being readable by others. Thinking about how to name things. Like, it's super important, but it can be really, really hard. But it's worth it. So, does it work? Does it work well? Could it work better? In other words, can it be maintained? So another part of writing maintainable stuff, could it work elsewhere? In other words, could it be reused? So oftentimes the same solution can fit multiple problems with only slight variations. And the ability to write code in that way, such that it can be used in multiple situations, is really indispensable. Put another way, can it be packaged and shared? So we often find ourselves using libraries that other people wrote, right? Like React, or the Firebase tools, or even just little utilities, like Moment.js if you were trying to do something with the date time stuff. Probably those people didn't write those libraries just because it's fun to write libraries. They had a problem to solve in a particular project. They just took some extra time to make a general purpose solution out of their super specific solution. To give you an example, about 10 years ago, the guy who is now my business partner and I were working at the same job. And we needed to be able to generate PDFs from a web page. And like I knew about a Linux command line utility that did that thing, and I mentioned that to Miles. So he used that to solve our problem in the app. But then he took a little extra time and he actually made a reusable library that generates PDFs out of your web pages using that command line utility. But he made it in such a way that it's super easy to just drop it into any Ruby on Rails project and do it. And he released it that way. And now 3 million people have used that thing because he just took a little extra time to make a general purpose solution out of our super specific one. We just needed to generate one report. Now we knew we were going to have to generate more reports later, and it would be worth the effort to kind of generalize the thing. But it became super popular because there just wasn't another tool for that platform that did that exact thing. Now, of course, then that has to be maintained because now there are lots of people who use it. And that's what Dave Jones is for. It's the other guy who works for us. But anyway, figure this stuff out, write maintainable, reusable code, and you'll probably get a job, probably the best job. So it is worth the effort. That's the scale. If you remember nothing else from the scale, remember this. Once you have things working, and even if they're working well and the user experience is good, you're not finished yet. It is worth taking the extra time to make it readable, make small commits, all that kind of stuff. We try to demonstrate this in class by sometimes we solve the problem and then we rewrite it so that it's just a little better, right? We've done that several times now. And we always make nice small commits with good commit messages because that's another big part of being able to understand your code. So you want to know how this, you find a line of code and you're like, what on earth was this supposed to mean? Why is this even here? It doesn't appear to be doing anything. So you can use a feature called get blame, which will tell you which commit it came from. So you can go back to that commit, and hopefully that's not a commit with 5,000 lines in it with a commit message that just says update. It doesn't tell you anything. But if it's a relatively small commit that says sort by the time of last edit, then you have some idea of what larger feature this line was part of, and it can help you figure out what it was intended to do, which might give you a clue of whether it's still doing that thing and let you know whether you can remove it or not. So that's Tony's scale of awesomeness. So back to the topic of what is a senior developer. Even though this is not what Tony was trying to define, I think that's actually a better definition than a lot. A senior developer is someone who can do all of those things. But let's look at it from a slightly different angle. There's a company called Frontside that came up with a really great framework for how they determine seniority. They called it Frontside's Conjoined Triangles of Senior Level Development, which is just a silly name. But they defined it as the intersection of these things: how well they work independently and lead, how technically capable they are, and how well they connect and contribute to a larger community. how well a person works independently and leads, leadership, how technically capable they are, technical capability, the one we knew about, and how well they connect and contribute to a larger community. So you like Venn diagrams, don't you? Everybody likes Venn diagrams. So here's the Venn diagram of that thing. Technical capability, leadership, and community. At the center is the senior developer. But each of these three things has a junior to senior track of its own. It's a lot of work. Let's break it down. Let's look at each one. So, technical capability. Has lots of APIs memorized, frequently encounters problems they've solved in previous projects, and can just fly through them. Can build a web and mobile app in 6 weeks, right? Those things are great for sure, but that front side post that Venn diagram came from had a definition that I love. A person with high technical capability is technically curious, tackles problems without giving up, and produces solutions that less experienced folks can use, maintain, and learn from. A person with high technical capability is technically curious, tackles problems without giving up, and produces solutions that less experienced folks can use, maintain, and learn from. So this is much more about aptitude than experience. And a senior developer needs to have some experience, but we all know that already. Exactly how much is difficult to say. If you're off the charts in these areas, though, you'll probably meet my criteria for technical capability quite quickly. I could tell you some stories about people who came in who were not even developers yet, but they had all of these traits. They were super technically curious. They never gave up. They just kept working until they figured something out. And they were dedicated to that thing from the scale of awesomeness of producing stuff that other people can read and understand and learn from. If you're the only one who can understand your crap, that's not that valuable. And you probably won't be able to understand it in another month or two. I've known people who actually took pride in the fact that no one else could read their code. Like they thought that made them, that just proved that they were better developers than them. No, it proved they were sloppy, that's all. And I don't want to hire anyone like that. So if you're technically curious, you'll want to understand how things are done and how to improve your, well, at least it works solutions. You won't be satisfied with that. So if you have that curiosity, I believe you will get the other stuff done in time. You'll just move down Tony's scale in no time. If you tackle problems without giving up, you're going to be your boss's favorite employee. If this doesn't come naturally to you, because this is not just telling you like what kind of people make good developers. Also, the goal here is to kind of help you make a plan to improve if you don't think you're there yet. So if you're not the kind of person who works without giving up, you can learn to do that. You don't have to throw in the towel just because, well, even though that might be your natural inclination if this is, if you're a person who gives up. But I believe you can change. I used to be worse about this than I am. Try hanging around other people who don't give up. It might rub off on you. When you fight through a really tricky problem that you did not think you'd be able to, it gives you a really good feeling afterward. And that can kind of be addictive. So celebrate your wins along the way. This was actually in the, I think that first presentation on what to expect out of the boot camp. Celebrate your wins. When you get something done, feel that dopamine rush of making a thing work. And become addicted to that. Don't become addicted to anything else. But become addicted to that. It's a great feeling, and it reinforces good habits. So if you start to kind of crave that feeling, then I think you can sometimes overcome your natural tendencies to give up when the going gets tough. So produce solutions that less experienced folks can use, maintain, and learn from. Really, a senior developer has to do more than just create clever solutions. They have to write software that can be maintained. So now I know what technical capability is, but how do I technical capability? Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a young man with a nearly full head of hair, a spool of blank CDRs, a pair of 19-inch CRTs that weighed 40 pounds each, and a Palm Pilot. And this man knew some HTML, some CSS, some JavaScript, some PHP, and MySQL. The World Wide Web was his for the taking. So he found himself a cubicle and some truly regrettable facial hair. And he became the person that a big data center depended on when they couldn't get their printer to work. I got to get that photo off the screen. So here's the building where this person, we'll call him Wavy, worked. And one day, this fellow was probably resetting someone's password when he thought, you know, I could harness the power of PHP to make a ticketing system. It took about an afternoon to make something that worked well enough if they were the only person who were ever going to use it. But then their boss saw it. Just happened to walk past the cubicle that day. And using the Google Images search for boss, said, hey, the operations center could actually use something like that. And he was real nice about it. He didn't yell, and he wasn't Billy Zane either. And he was like, yeah, we could actually use something like that. And just like that, Wavy was coding for a living instead of just fixing people's printers. So at that time, okay, it was me, folks. I was the sole developer writing software that only my coworkers would ever use, no customers. So I made all the technology decisions, determined the schedule, because no one else had any idea how long stuff should take. They didn't know. I was the only developer there. And I built the stuff all by myself. And it worked. And you know what? It worked pretty well over time. I was pretty new. I was only a year out of college. But I just had a natural interest in making stuff that worked and that actually made people happy to use. So, you know, I just kind of kept at it until basically those were the reviews I was getting. Made it very error tolerant and stuff, had good error messages that told people what the actual problem was and all that kind of stuff. So it worked and it worked well. But could it be maintained? Crap, no. I was what's called a cowboy coder. Cowboy coding is an undisciplined approach to software development that gives programmers complete control over the development process. I did things like make changes to the production database directly. Hey, I only deleted the production database in the middle of the day once. Okay, twice. But the second time, yeah, anyway. Truth is, I didn't know a better way to do it. I kind of had a vague idea that you weren't supposed to do that, but how else do you do it? How else do you release something other than like just logging into production and manually changing all the database tables? Find some other way. That's very, very bad. Now, you're going to work for companies probably that have some structure in place that wouldn't even allow programmers to do that kind of thing. You probably won't even have a login to the production database. But again, I was the sole developer at a company that needed some stuff written, so you know we made do. And I didn't know a better way to do it, and frankly, I didn't even know how to find out. I bought new books all the time. I was always reading technical books and stuff, but they were just teaching me about the code. They didn't teach stuff like that. Nothing about the craft. And I did not know a single other programmer. I didn't make any friends in college. People thought I was weird. Please. And so I was just creating spaghetti code. I was a cowboy coder creating spaghetti code. But then something magical happened. I asked my boss if we could hire a second developer. And he said, yes, we can hire a second developer. So we hired a second developer. And he was immediately hit by an SUV. Don't worry, he got better. He was back at work eventually, but seriously, this was like his second week. He got hit by an SUV on his bike and broke an arm. And it wasn't my boss, but like one of my internal customers was freaking out. He was like, can we hire an intern and have him come in and dictate? Like dictate? Yeah, like what, you want him to be here like curly brace? No, the other one. Shift. Hit shift, left bracket. No, not left parenthesis, left bracket. No, we're not going to hire an intern and have him dictate. Plus, he's on narcotics, for heaven's sake. He just got hit by an SUV. But he did come back to work eventually. So there was now a second developer working for me. Well, at that time he was working for me. And his name was Miles. And guess what? See that plaid there? Oh my gosh, it's Miles. Yes. Same guy. So, and he had that same curiosity. He was even younger than me, and I was pretty doggone young. But he had that same curiosity, but he was reading different stuff than I was reading. So he was reading different blogs and so on. He was reading about stuff like test-driven development. And we were both real excited about this. And so we would talk all day long about these things. He had heard of meetups, which were a new thing at the time, so we started going to a meetup. Pretty soon the organizer of that meetup got bored, and Miles took it over, and he still runs it today. IndyRB, the Indianapolis Ruby Brigade. IndyRB.org. Check it out, kids. It's a good time. So we both just became so much better just because we were working around another person who shared that curiosity. We had a similar level of experience. It's not that one of us was like really advanced in teaching the other person things. We were just kind of encouraging each other to learn things. So if we had a problem like, well, what do you do instead of editing production directly? Well, let's find out. And between the two of us, I bet we can figure it out. Oh, you're actually a person that people don't find weird and make friends easily. Talk to your friends, introduce them to me, and then I'll pretend they're my friends. And between the two of us, we can learn some stuff and we can figure this out and come up with some better processes. It was so exciting, folks. We started writing maintainable code. We started using Git. It was great. So in short order, we started to improve just because we were curious and hanging out with other curious people. Once we actually went to the meetup, that was a bunch more curious people. Oh man, suddenly I knew other developers. And just, you couldn't help but learn hanging around these people. Because you'd talk about other stuff too, but you'd get around to the code sooner or later, you talk about your projects, whatever, and you just couldn't help but pick up on some things. They'd tell you stories about their work. Maybe they tell you about this jerk they work with who's like this, and you'll listen to the story, you'll analyze it, and you'll be like, you know what? I think maybe you're the jerk in this story. And you'll start to realize, oh gosh, I do that same thing too. I think I'm the hero in my own story, but it turns out sometimes I'm the jerk. And so you start adjusting your behavior, that kind of stuff. Be self-aware, folks. It's good, but we'll get back to that. So, some actionable advice out of that lengthy story. Go to meetups. Indy has tons of great tech meetups. IndyHackers.org, which Miles also founded, maintains a calendar of them. Many of them are recorded. There's some good technical talks every month, and just as importantly, you can meet and hang out with other developers. There's a React Indy, there's Indy.js, there's IndyPy, there's IndyRB, lots of great stuff. Indy.js always has a waiting list, so if you're interested in that, RSVP early each month. There's a lot to be said for hanging around people who are at least curious enough to show up to a meetup every month. Or every other month, whatever. Subscribe to newsletters. I subscribe to all three of these newsletters. Ruby Weekly, JavaScript Weekly, React Status. They're all three from the same company. They're excellent. They're free. And I don't have time to obviously read all of these things every single week. But I at least scan the headlines. And that's how I find out, oh, React 16.4 was released this week. And maybe I'll at least do a quick scan to see, were there any major new features? Are there breaking changes? Is all our stuff going to quit working? And this is, kind of how I keep on top of things. So if I can't read it right now, maybe I'll bookmark it or do something that isn't from 1997, but somehow save this thing to read it later. And that's a lot of how I attempt to keep on top of things, or at least have an idea of what I don't know yet. Like I know that everyone's talking about Vue.js, V-U-E. I haven't done it myself yet, but I know it's kind of the new hotness for people who are into React as an alternative to React. I'm interested in learning it sometime. At least I know it exists because I read these newsletters, even if I don't know how to do it yet. So what else can you do to power up your technical capability? Teach. You don't need to be a senior developer before you can teach someone or give a talk at a meetup or even a conference. And incidentally, presenting at one of those meetups where there's a small, non-critical crowd is a great way to practice for that kind of thing. You want to learn something really well? Promise someone else you'll teach it to them. And it can be a small thing. Maybe you just want to figure out that context API I referred to earlier. It's just a little thing. Watch some videos, teach it to your buddy. Great way to get better at it yourself. Because let me tell you, if you promise that you're going to stand up in front of people for 3 weeks and yap about a topic all day long, that scares you into learning it pretty darn well. And yes, that's how I learned React the first time. I promised to teach a boot camp, a 3-week boot camp on the topic, and I didn't know it yet. So that scared me into learning it super well, because not only do you have to be able to do it, you have to be able to do it with people watching, and you have to be able to answer questions and not sound like an idiot. So, you don't have to obviously volunteer to do a 3-week boot camp. But just like tell someone you'll grab coffee with them and talk to them about some little tiny topic. It's great practice, and it helps you reinforce your understanding even of the basics. So yeah, someone who's trying to learn React, tell them you'll just help them get their GitHub set up for it. It's good practice, and it helps you make sure that you actually understand why these commands work. It's a good idea. So be technically curious. So we had technical capability, leadership, and community, right? So this was just like the first bullet in technical capability. So be technically curious. Tackle problems without giving up. Produce solutions that less experienced folks can use, maintain, and learn from. Talk to other developers. Go to meetups. Grab coffee with someone. Whatever. Just talk to people. Subscribe to newsletters. Follow these steps, and soon you'll be saying, I am technical capability, and so can you. Technical capability. All right. So on to leadership. A person with leadership skills knows how to develop and follow a sense of purpose in themselves and in others. How to develop and follow a sense of purpose in themselves and others. They're willing to point out, own, and fix things that are broken in their organization and in their own career tracks. So how the heck do you get better at that? You could read some of the approximately 112 billion leadership books out there. A couple of those are really good, by the way. Radical Candor, the orange one there with the arrows. Great book. Great book. You should totally read it. Read the audiobook. You can listen to podcasts. Simple Leadership's a good one. Manager Tools is excellent, but does tend to discuss management specifically, and leadership and management are not the same thing. But the same folks who wrote that one have one called Career Tools too. And I seriously recommend that you listen to some of the Career Tools podcasts. It's helpful even in college. And you wouldn't believe the topics that they cover. And they cover them in great depth. Like there's an entire half-hour podcast on how to introduce yourself to someone. And it's great. It may sound extreme. Listen to it at 2x speed if you have to. But listen to a couple of them, and I think you'll like them, and you'll figure out which ones you need to listen to. But seriously, it's terrific stuff. How to do interviews from both sides. It's a little late to be telling you this, right? But hey, I notice here they have one called Creating a Presentation, but I only got 8 seconds into it, so sorry. But no, on presentation, they have so many. They have this one, Creating a Presentation, which is 33 minutes long. And then they have one called, how to use body language. No, they have 2 half-hour podcasts on just how to use body language during a presentation. They have another one on what to do with your voice. Seriously, it's super in-depth, but it's really good stuff. They're simple concepts. It covers everything you could possibly encounter in the workplace. And it's really, really good. You should check it out. Another way to get better at this leadership stuff, talk to other people about it. You're all young. You're not going to be like the CEOs of things right away unless you're like founding stuff. And if you do found stuff now, you're probably going to be terrible at it. No offense. But you just haven't lived that long. So find other people with more experience. Maybe you can find a mentor, or maybe you can just find someone who will tolerate you long enough to grab a coffee. But talk to other people about it. If you can't get someone with more experience to pay any attention to you, talk to each other. Talk to your classmates. Compare notes. Talk about situations that you've run into and how you dealt with it. Analyze your own mistakes. Analyze other people's mistakes. So you can figure out, well, I don't want to do what that guy did. He got himself fired. So talk about it with other people. If you can't find somebody to actually talk to in person, find a Slack group. There are lots of Slack groups for this kind of stuff. Heck, Indie Hackers has a great Slack group that has lots of channels. One of them is just like engineering management. Another one's just general stuff. Heck, there's a music channel on the Indie Hackers Slack. But it's a really good community. You should all be signing up for it right now. Okay. Trade stories. Learn from other people's successes and failures. And it's worth pointing out that this doesn't necessarily mean becoming the Harvard Business School ideal leader. You don't have to be the most extroverted person in the world in order to lead. One of the quietest people I've ever known is an incredible leader. He joins a team, and they just kind of can't help but get better. He has that sense of purpose, and it's contagious. When he joins the development team, they just can't help but get better, even though he's super, super quiet. You don't have to be outgoing to be a leader. So follow this advice, listen to some podcasts, talk to other people, find a mentor if you can, or just talk to people over coffee or whatever, and pretty soon you'll be saying, I am leadership, and so can you. Leadership. So that brings us to community. This definition is really long. So a person with community skills has a sense of being part of a larger whole, a desire to contribute, and a sense that the other people are not simply characters in his or her own movie, but fully realized individuals. A sense of being part of a larger whole, a desire to contribute, and a sense that others are fully realized individuals, not just your supporting cast. So it helps not to be a psychopath, basically. Sounds a lot like empathy, right? I know a tech leader in Indy, a manager, who actually values empathy above all else when hiring developers. It's one of the harder things to develop if it doesn't come to you naturally, but you can do that too. Writing code that other people can understand and learn from, giving thoughtful code reviews, being receptive to other people's reviews of your code, helping others grow, taking direction, accepting feedback, all of that's being part of something that's bigger than yourself. A desire to contribute. Maybe being part of a community means making open source contributions. Maybe it doesn't. I'm not one of those who says you absolutely have to have a super full GitHub full of open source contributions or you're not a real developer. I understand you get home after work, the last thing in the world you want to do is write more code. I understand that. So maybe it means going to meetups, participating in hackathons, participating in the hour of code once a year. Whatever. It doesn't have to mean those specific things, but they're great opportunities to get involved and start to feel like part of something bigger if you can't find that at your job. So do this stuff, help other people, be a decent human being, learn from your mistakes, and pretty soon you'll be saying, I am community, and so can you. So that's the diagram. So I'll be frank, not a lot of people reach the senior level in all three areas. Not a lot of people even want to. Sounds like a lot of work, and sometimes you can only focus on improving one thing at a time. I'll tell you at Fretless, we follow the same measure that Frontside does, who came up with this model, and that is if you've reached the senior level in technical capability and one of the other two, and you're at least kind of mid-level in the other one, we consider you a senior developer. So you've mastered technical capability and community, you're a senior developer. You master technical capability and leadership, and you're not a psychopath, senior developer. All three, I don't know, mega senior or something like that. But what if you've developed both leadership and community skills, but your technical capabilities are still at a novice level? So maybe you're not a senior developer yet, but like career switchers are often here. So I should have asked your permission ahead of time, but I didn't, so I'm going to do it anyway. Dana is a career switcher. She did not do development straight out of college. She did other stuff first. She had other jobs. And in the course of doing those other jobs, her community and leadership skills developed super high. So obviously when she started doing a coding boot camp, she didn't have much technical knowledge. She had that curiosity. She didn't give up. She had those traits. She just didn't have the experience yet. And I want to assure you that all that experience in another field is worthwhile. It all counts. Because it can be super hard for technical people to develop in these other two areas if they haven't yet. So, you may be closer to being a senior developer than someone who has technical mastery just because they haven't figured out how to be a decent human yet. All of those skills you get doing other stuff are going to serve you well in life and work. So we've hired some bootcamp grads in the past who had very strong marks in those areas, and it's been great. So if you're technically curious, you don't give up, and you're at least convinced that you ought to strive to write maintainable code, you can learn the technical details, right? So maybe that's where Dana was when she started learning how to code. She was already curious. She already had a tendency not to give up. And she cared about other people. She wasn't just going to write crap that only she could understand, or that she could only understand long enough to write it once. So she was already that kind of person. So, not that big a deal that you still have to learn the tech, as far as I'm concerned. It's much harder, if you already have this, to learn how to play nice with others if it doesn't come naturally to you. Now, I think TechPoint actually does a pretty good job of weeding those people out before they get here. So I'm pretty sure there are no psychopaths in the room. If there are, please don't kill me. So if you take nothing else from this talk, let it be this. Technical capability is not enough to qualify as a senior or to even be a good developer. No one with mad technical skills and a surly attitude wants to hear that, but just speaking for Fretless, we can't deliver and maintain the kind of products that we need to based on technical chops alone. You got to be a well-rounded human being. So hopefully you're able to grow in your own life, make a plan, work on it, and soon enough you'll be saying, I am senior, and so can you. So here's an example when it comes to just becoming a better person. I've alluded to it a little bit in some small anecdotes, but I'll tell you another one. So my very first year out of college, before I even took that other job, I lived in a different city, and we had this group of friends that we hung out with, and there was one dude in that group that nobody could stand. And one day he didn't show up. So everyone sat around griping about him and describing all of the traits that made it so that no one wanted to be in the same room as this dude. And as they were doing this, I was sitting back and thinking, my gosh, I do those things too. I was a way less severe version of the same person, but it was kind of a big moment for me. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of a jerk, I think, right? So that was the easy way of finding out. Hearing people talk about somebody else and recognizing the reason I can't stand that person, I do all of those same things. Maybe not as much or as bad, but I do all of those same things. I should work on that. Before, maybe people were already saying that when I was out of the room. But pay attention to how other people respond to you. The way they cringe when you talk, or the way they walk the other way if they see you coming down the hall, or carefully avoid eye contact. And try to figure out what it is that's off-putting and work on those things. Because everybody has problems. And if you can figure out what they are and work on them, practice, it's tough. It's tough and it takes years. But it's really worth it to try to just become a more compassionate human being who pays attention to the other people in their lives and not just treat them as their own supporting cast. So let me tell you about a person who used to teach this class with me. He coasted through life on technical capability alone for the first 30 years of his life. When he was in junior high, he started a lawn mowing company. So did I in junior high, incidentally. I was not that dedicated to it, though. So you know how in movies and stuff, maybe people do this in real life too, but in movies, kids are always sneaking comic books into class and hiding them in their school books. He would take lawn mowing manuals in with him and Indiana code and the laws. 18,000 feet per second is the maximum blade speed of a mower under law. I should know that if I'm going to be a lawn. He just wouldn't do something like that unless he could just do the heck out of it, even in junior high. If he was going to mow lawns, by golly, he was going to mow lawns better than anyone else. And by the time he graduated from high school, he was making more than his father. But he decided to go to college anyway. So he wanted to get out of college as quickly as he could. So he became a chemistry major. He took the easy route, right? This is what he was thinking. He had so many advanced credits that the fastest way he could graduate was being a chemistry major. Plus chemistry, it's just math. You can just science the crap out of that stuff. You don't need to deal with people. You can just use your technical capability and get by. It's not sociology or anthropology or something like that with people. So he did that. He became a chemistry major. He graduated and decided to become a professional wakeboarder. So he sold his lawnmowers, bought a boat, moved to Florida, became a professional wakeboarder. Turns out that doesn't pay, so he was also a UPS driver while he was doing that. Turns out that wasn't super intellectually satisfying to this dude either. So he got a job that actually used his chemistry degree, but he quickly discovered that with a bachelor's in chemistry, the only jobs you can get are ones that truly anyone could do, but that by law require someone with a chemistry degree. So truly, a trained monkey could do them, but they require a chemistry degree. So those were the jobs he was doing, and that wasn't satisfying. So he decided to go to grad school. So he went to grad school, majored in organic chemistry, and about a year in, he kind of realized, wow, these people really like chemistry. Like, they really like chemistry. I don't think I like chemistry that much. So he dropped out and became a mechanical engineer, as you do, right? He saw this job for mechanical engineer, thought, well, I can figure that out. It requires some chemistry knowledge, and I've already got that. Yes, he got the job as a mechanical engineer with a chemistry degree, having never been an engineer before. Because he just like he could just go home, read all the books, and just figure it out. And it always worked for him. Like, this never backfired for years. Now, that's the 2008 recession came around, and that place was going to have to let people go, and he was the most recent hire, so he knew it was going to be him. So his roommate had just gotten the very first iPhone. And he saw that, thought it was pretty cool, and said, I'm going to work for Apple. So he went to the Apple store, and he said, I want a job. And they said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be on the technical support team. They're like, well, we don't have any openings there, so how about sales? And he said, and I kid you not, he said this, okay, but I'm going to be running the technical support team in 2 years. Subtitle, 18 months later, he became the lead genius at the Apple store, which is a great title for someone who's already kind of an egomaniac. So he became the head of the tech support team. And their stats went way up once he took over. They were getting way more stuff done. And then a couple months in, his boss took him aside and said, you know what, maybe we made a mistake. I don't think you were ready for this. And this was pretty much the first time in his life he had ever heard this. He had always been able to just do anything by throwing himself in it. He was also a professional bodybuilder at the time. I mean, this dude just doesn't do anything halfway. So he was hearing, you did a bad job for the first time in his life. Because you know why their stats went up? Because if someone on the team was struggling with a solution, he'd just go, move, fix it himself. Because he could fix things super fast. He could replace the logic board in a MacBook Pro in 7 minutes and 43 seconds. And he knew that. So it was faster for him to just fix everything himself. But that's not how you build a team. He's not going to work there forever. And they have too much to do for one person to do it all. So that is just not how you do it. Now, thankfully, Apple has some very good management training and stuff, and they sent him to this stuff. And he learned about nonviolent communication and all this stuff. But he got a really good tip. And his first reaction, given this guy's personality at the time, you may imagine, was to just think to himself, well, screw you. I don't need this job. I'll go somewhere else. They'll be happy to have me. But he took a moment, he paused, and he thought, okay, I respect this person. I think this person's good at their job, so I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to try to do what they're saying. And they gave him the advice, tomorrow, come in, put your hands behind your back, and keep them there all day. You're not allowed to touch anything, and your team still has to deliver. You have to use your words. And it was nearly impossible for him, but he did it, and he found, oh my gosh, he got better at this stuff, and the people who worked for him were actually getting better at their jobs too. So over the next 4 years, he didn't get fired, and over the next 4 years, he kind of, anybody seen The Martian?